The fairgrounds buzzed with life, flags whipping in the wind, loudspeakers crackling with announcements, and the sharp scent of grilled meat drifting over the field. Veterans in faded uniforms walked alongside families and gawkers. A stage had been set up at the edge of the shooting range, where rows of polished rifles gleamed under the sun like ceremonial swords. Riley adjusted her ball cap and tugged the sleeves of her oversized jacket down past her wrists. She didn't speak as she followed Hawk past the crowds, Copper trailing behind them on a lead rope like a silent sentinel. The horse had traveled quietly in the trailer, but now he moved with restless eyes, ears flicking as the noise grew. She felt it too, the weight of the stares, the pointed looks. Kids her age running around with cotton candy, while older men nodded at Hawk, some of them recognizing him from years past. He offered curt nods in return, but kept walking, jaw tight. "Sure you still want to do this?" he asked low. Riley didn't hesitate. Yes. They reached the registration tent, where a young man looked up from a clipboard and blinked at Riley's age. "She's on the list," Hawk grunted, handing over the flyer. "Special demo slot." The man frowned but checked the sheet. "Blindfold shooting? Is this some kind of trick show?" "No trick," Hawk said. "Just aim and fire." Across the field, the shooting range was already buzzing with competitors. Men and women in uniform, steady hands and stoic eyes. They wore ear protection, expensive scopes, kneeling pads. Riley didn't have any of it. Just her father's letter in her back pocket and the .22 rifle slung across her shoulder. She stood at the edge of the spectator fence, eyes scanning the lineup. No children, no one under 20, and certainly no one tying a blindfold around their head. A short, sharp laugh drew her attention. One of the shooters, a man with sunburned skin and mirrored sunglasses, leaned on his rifle. "You kidding me?" he said to no one in particular. "What is this? YouTube Talent Hour?" A ripple of laughter followed. Riley's cheeks flared red, but she said nothing. Hawk didn't move, just stepped closer and whispered, "Don't shoot to impress. Shoot to remember." Her fingers tightened around the rifle. When her name was called, the announcer hesitated before saying it twice, like it had to be a mistake. She stepped forward, blindfold in hand. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A few chuckles. One old man removed his hat. She climbed the short platform, her boots clunking softly against the wood. The range stretched out before her, targets at 10, 20, 50 yards. Tin plates, steel silhouettes, spinning discs. She tied the blindfold, slow and tight, blocking out everything. She couldn't see the crowd now, or the other competitors, or even Hawk. Just the dark. She exhaled once. Then again. Listened. The breeze tickled the side of her cheek from left to right. Grass rustled in the distance. A flag flapped. Somewhere to her left, someone coughed. She raised the rifle. The crowd fell silent. The first shot rang out. A metallic clang followed. Then another. And another. 6 in a row. By the 7th, the murmurs had stopped. By the 10th, even the skeptical shooter had lowered his sunglasses. She moved like clockwork, reloading smoothly, recentering after every breath. Each shot, a memory. Her father's voice. The sound of Kappa's hooves. Hawk's gruff corrections. The smell of oil on the cloth they used to clean the rifle. The final shot was the furthest target, a moving steel disc that bobbed on a rail. She tilted her head, listening. The crowd held its breath. She fired. The shot rang true. The disc spun wildly, hit dead center. Riley stood still, rifle at her side, blindfold still covering her eyes. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the crowd erupted. Applause thundered across the field. The announcer, stumbling over his words, declared it the cleanest run of the day. But Riley didn't react. She simply reached up, untied the blindfold, and let it fall to the platform. Her eyes scanned the crowd, but not for cheers. She found Hawk. He stood beside Copper, arms crossed, mouth still as stone, but his eyes said everything. She stepped down quietly and walked straight to the horse. Copper nudged her shoulder, his breath warm. "Wasn't for them," she whispered, running her fingers along his mane. "It was for him." She pulled the letter from her pocket and pressed it gently to her chest. The man in mirrored sunglasses approached as Hawk tightened the straps, on Kappa's halter. Who trained her, the man asked. No one, Hawk said. She trained herself. The man scoffed, but his tone was quieter now. She's got instincts. She's got fire, Hawk corrected. And she don't miss. Riley turned to them. I'm not done. The man blinked. Done with what? Whatever comes next. Hawk didn't smile. Not fully, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Then we'd better get back to work. Back at the ranch, the world felt smaller, quieter. No crowds, no applause. Just the rustle of dry grass and the sound of Kappa's hooves as he paced the edge of the pasture. Riley sat cross-legged on the porch steps, polishing the rifle Hawk had once loaned her like it was sacred. It was no longer just a weapon. It was part of her story now. The blindfold lay beside her, folded neatly, as if waiting for a reason to be used again. Hawk stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching her like he always did, half-guarded, half-proud. He didn't say much after the competition, and she hadn't asked for praise. They both knew what had happened. It didn't need to be said. You cleaned that thing 5 times already, he muttered. She glanced up at him. I like it clean. You keep it up, and you'll wear the barrel smooth. She shrugged. It earned it. Hawk nodded once, then sat beside her with a groan, rubbing his knee. Still hurts like the devil. Weather's changing. Copper knew before the clouds did, Riley said softly. He got jumpy last night. That's a good horse. No, she said, looking toward the pasture. He's not just a good horse. He's a survivor. Like you. Hawk turned his head toward her, but said nothing. Riley let the silence sit for a moment, then pulled something from her jacket pocket. The letter. Edges creased, ink faded, but the words still clear. She held it out. Hawk hesitated, then took it. His eyes scanned the page slowly. He didn't speak for a long time. He wrote this for you? She nodded. Your dad, he ever come home? She shook her head. Not in the way I hoped. Hawk handed the letter back, but his hand lingered. I lost someone too, he said. Years ago. A little girl. She wasn't mine, not by blood, but I loved her like she was. Bombing in Fallujah. Couldn't save her. Riley's voice was barely above a whisper. You never talk about her. No, I don't. She looked out toward the pasture. We both lost people we wanted to protect. He followed her gaze. That's the thing about war. Sometimes it follows you home. Shows up in places you didn't expect. Like barns. And blindfolds. They sat quietly for a while, the sun dipping low, staining the hills in gold. Then Copper whinnied from the field, tossing his head. Riley stood, rifle slung across her back. I'm going to try something. She walked into the pasture, approached Copper slowly. The horse didn't shy away. When she grabbed the reins and mounted without a saddle, he didn't flinch. Hawk rose, leaning against the porch post, cane in hand, eyes squinting. Careful, girl. I'm always careful, she called. But her grin said otherwise. She nudged Copper forward, and the horse responded. First a trot, then a gallop, hooves kicking up dirt as they carved a path across the field. Riley leaned into the wind, hair streaming behind her, eyes wide open. She didn't need the blindfold now. From the porch, Hawk watched her ride with a stillness that bordered on reverence. Something cracked inside him. Something old, buried under years of pain and silence. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was healing. Maybe it was both. When she returned, dust on her boots and laughter in her breath, he met her at the gate. Next time, he said, we work on riding while shooting. You ready for that? Already thinking about it, she said. That night, Riley hung the blindfold on a nail above her bedroll in the barn. Next to it, she framed the letter behind a sheet of glass Hawk had cut for her himself. Morning came early. She saddled Copper. Hawk packed a few supplies. They didn't have a destination, not really. Just a stretch of road ahead and a sense that the story wasn't over. As they rode past the tree line, Hawk looked over. You know, kid, I didn't believe in you. Not at first. I know, she said. You changed that. She smiled. You weren't the only one. And together, with the rifle, the horse, and the scars, they rode toward whatever came next. Not as a broken soldier and a forgotten girl, but as a team no one would ever doubt again. The sun hadn't yet risen when Riley stepped into the chilled morning air, barefoot, rifle in hand, blindfold tied around her neck. The range behind the barn was still cloaked in shadow, dew glistening on the grass, but she knew every step by heart now. Each tin can, each hay bale, each shifting wind current, memorized. She didn't need Hawk's help, didn't need his nod of approval. He had nothing to teach her, anyway. At least, nothing he was willing to offer. She tied the cloth over her eyes, tightened it, and waited. The first shot cracked through the quiet like a whip. Ting, then another. Ting, ting. The barn door creaked behind her. Hawk didn't say a word, but she heard the rustle of his jacket, the familiar drag of his boot, and cane through the gravel. He watched her in silence as she hit 8 cans in a row, each one without sight, each shot calm, precise, unnerving in its confidence. When she lowered the rifle and untied the blindfold, their eyes met. He didn't praise her, just stared. "You're wasting good bullets," he muttered finally. "I hit every target. Doesn't make it any less wasteful." She shrugged, turned away. "Then don't watch." That should have been the end of it. But later that afternoon, a storm rolled in, hard and sudden, the kind that rips through fences and shakes the hills. The rain came down sideways. Wind howled through the slats in the barn. Riley rushed inside to check on Copper, but the stall was empty. She froze. The gate hung open. Lightning cracked. She bolted into the storm, calling his name. "Copper! Copper, come back!" Mud sucked at her boots as she ran past the tree line, slipping, stumbling, until she spotted movement on the ridge. A dark shape. The horse, wild-eyed, thrashing near a downed fence. She approached slowly, arms out, speaking low, not caring that the rain soaked her through. "I'm here," she whispered. "It's okay. I've got you." Coppa's ears flicked. He stepped back, then forward uncertain. She held her breath. Then, miraculously, he let her touch his mane. Behind her, unseen, Hawk watched from the porch, water dripping from the brim of his hat, his expression unreadable. By nightfall, the storm had passed. The ranch lay in quiet ruin, branches down, fencing shattered. But Copper was safe in his stall, and Riley was curled beside him in dry clothes, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Hawk walked into the barn with something wrapped in oilcloth. She sat up when he handed it to her. "What's this?" He didn't answer. She unwrapped it. A Warren .22 rifle. Clean, polished, cared for. Not military grade, but solid. "You said you'd hit anything," Hawk said gruffly. "Try with a real gun." Riley blinked. "You giving this to me?" "I'm lending it," he growled. "You break it, I break you." But his voice wasn't harsh. Not really. That night, she lay awake staring at the rifle beside her bedroll. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the first thing someone had given her since her father disappeared. And it meant something, though she didn't know what yet. The next morning, training changed. Hawk didn't volunteer lessons, but he stopped turning away. He watched her stance. Offer corrections. Elbow in. Shoulder tight. Breathe before the shot, not during. They didn't talk much, but they didn't have to. In the evenings, they cleaned the rifle together in silence. He showed her how to check the chamber, how to oil the bolt, how to feel for a hairline crack in the wood. When she asked where he learned to shoot, Hawk just said, "Places I'd rather forget." But one evening, as they sat by the fire, he finally added, "First time I pulled a trigger, I was younger than you. Didn't know what I was doing. Hit a man from 100 yards. Still see his face sometimes." Riley said nothing. She just handed him a cloth. They understood each other in that strange, broken way only the wounded do. And Copper? He began following Riley everywhere. She didn't ride him, not yet, but he walked behind her like a shadow. In the mornings, she found him waiting outside the barn. At night, he rested with his head near her blanket. One afternoon, Riley rigged up a makeshift obstacle course behind the corral. Hay bales stacked at odd angles, metal lids swinging from ropes, cans on thin wooden poles. She ran it blindfolded, shooting in quick succession. Missed 2. Hit 7. Hawk watched from a distance. Arms folded, jaw tight. "You're going to be a spectacle," he warned. "I don't care. They'll laugh at you. I've been laughed at before." He hesitated, then said quietly, "It's not about hitting targets, Riley. It's about controlling the moment, not letting it control you." She nodded like she understood. She didn't. Not yet. That night, she found an envelope tucked inside her duffel, yellowed with time, her name written in fading ink. Inside was a letter from her father, one she hadn't known existed. If you're reading this, it means I'm not coming back. But don't you dare shrink, Riley girl. You've got the gift. Remember what I taught you. Trust your breath, your instinct, your gut. Aim without eyes. See with your heart. She folded it carefully, tucked it beneath her pillow. The next morning, Hawk stood waiting at the fence with a flyer in his hand. His voice was unreadable. There's a veterans shooting event this weekend, he said. Exhibition match. Big crowd. Military types. Real shooters. She looked up from adjusting Kappa's halter. You want me to go? I want you to decide. She didn't speak, just held his gaze for a long time. I'll go, she said, but I'm not going for them. And for the first time, Hawk smiled. Just barely, but it was real. The wind rolled dry over the Barrett Ranch, carrying the faint scent of dust and gunpowder. Somewhere beyond the corral, a line of rusted tin cans danced in the breeze. A 12-year-old girl stood behind them, small hands curled tightly around the wooden stock of a battered air rifle. A strip of cloth, knotted at the back of her head, covered her eyes. Kid, came a drawl from behind, rich with disbelief. You even know which way the barrel's pointing? Riley didn't answer. Her stance wobbled slightly, toes buried in the dirt for balance. Her breath was shallow but rhythmic. She shifted her feet, tilted her chin toward the wind, and listened. A single fly buzzed past. Somewhere, a hawk shrieked overhead. Behind her, leaning against a split-rail fence with a half-amused scowl, stood Hawk. Navy SEAL, retired. Scar across one cheek, cane resting near one boot. Built like a monument, tall, sun-leathered, and with eyes that hadn't softened since the war. He wasn't laughing exactly, but close enough. The trigger clicked. One can fell. Hawk's brow twitched. Just once. Then he snorted. Fluke. Riley tugged the blindfold down, blinking under the afternoon sun. Guess we'll see. A week earlier, she'd arrived with nothing but a duffel bag, a dog-eared photo of a man in uniform, and silence thicker than mud. Social services had dropped her off like a parcel. She's yours for now, the woman had said. Her mom's gone. No next of kin. Hawk hadn't expected to keep her long. Maybe a few weeks. Just until the paperwork cleared. He'd agreed more out of guilt than anything else. His sister's dying wish, scribbled in a letter weeks before the accident. Take care of her, Hawk. She's not just any girl. But what he got wasn't a grieving child. It was a ghost. Riley barely spoke. She drifted through the ranch house like smoke, silent, watching everything with those wide, unblinking eyes. She didn't cry, didn't complain, just vanished into the barn each day and came back with hay in her hair and dirt on her knees. Hawk didn't ask questions. He wasn't good with kids, never had been. Better with firearms than feelings. So he let her be, until he caught her shadow one morning, standing outside the gun shed, peering through the slats like a thief. That's when he barked his first real words at her. You even know what that is? He gestured to the rifle she was staring at. She nodded. You ever shot one? A beat, then another nod. He squinted. You're 12. 11 3/4, she corrected. And you think you're going to hit something? No, she said. I know I will. That was 3 days ago. Since then, she'd practiced every morning behind the barn, using the wind as her compass and sound as her sight. Hawk hadn't helped, hadn't taught her a damn thing. But every day, a few more cans toppled over. And every day, he found himself watching from farther away, arms crossed, unsure whether to laugh or take cover. Riley didn't care if he watched or not. Her focus lived elsewhere, on the pattern of the breeze, the way sound bounced off the barn wall, the split-second rhythm of movement and stillness. Her father had taught her once, back before he vanished overseas. You don't need to see to aim true, he'd whispered one hunting trip. You just need to trust the space between sounds. She remembered. What she didn't remember, didn't wanna, was the screaming the night her mom died. The smoke, the red lights, the way no one had come until morning. She pushed it down, deep. That afternoon, Riley wandered back into the barn where Copper stood chewing hay behind his stall gate. He was old for a horse, built like a war tank, skittish as a rabbit. They said he'd been part of a military unit once, used to gunfire and smoke. But when they retired him to the ranch, He'd refused every rider since. Except her. At night, she curled up in the loft above him, whispering stories into the dark. He never responded, but he never left either. Just paced softly and nudged the ladder now and then, like checking if she was still there. "You don't have to believe in me," she whispered now, reaching out to stroke the beast's broad neck. "Nobody does." Outside, Hawk stood at the fence, watching the last tin can spin in the dirt. He didn't understand her, didn't know what drove her to push like this. He just knew the look in her eyes when she fired, like the world stopped spinning and all that existed was the next breath and the next bullet. He thought about the scars on his own hands, the years of war that hadn't broken him, but bent him so far he couldn't find center anymore. And here was this half-sized girl with nothing left, carving out meaning with a borrowed gun and a horse who'd stopped trusting people a decade ago. She wasn't strong. She wasn't loud. But, damn it, there was something about her. Later, when she returned to the range to reset the cans, Hawk spoke without turning around. "You think you're ready for a real shot?" She paused. "Wasn't that real?" He nodded toward the hills. "There's a veterans event next week. Bunch of military types, real marksmen. Big crowd. You step up blindfolded there, and they'll eat you alive." She didn't hesitate. "Then I'll give him something to chew on." This time, Hawk didn't laugh. He just watched her walk away, ponytail swaying, rifle slung over her shoulder like it belonged there. And for the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, she did.